Hello everybody, I hope you're having a great day. Here is a new story for you all, and this is connected to a few other ones I've done, so I'll be sure to link them in the description and pinned comment. And I know a lot of you have been wanting to join the Discord, but the links always seem to be expired, so I'm also going to be putting a new one in the pinned comment for anyone that's been trying to join. And cool, my cat's freaking out. What are you doing? What the? Guts, get out! Get out! Get off the window. Crackhead. Anyway, and one other thing I wanted to mention was that the Halloween idea that I had about going around to different ghost towns or abandoned towns in the state that I live in, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to do that. I'm just planning for it now and figuring out how I'm going to go about it. And I'm going to turn that into like a series on the channel where I talk about the ghost towns, give history about them, and then do some urban exploring around them, I guess. I'm not really sure exactly how it's going to go. I've never done anything like that before, but I thought it'd be something cool to add to the channel. But yeah, let me know what you think about that idea. And if you feel like helping out the channel, you can like, share, and subscribe and all that. But with that said, enjoy the story. My name is Joshua, or Josh for short, and I'm dead. It took me a while to come to this realization and to recall the circumstances around my death. It wasn't easy facing up to the truth. Some of you might be familiar with my story if you've heard my previous accounts. If not, I guess it's pretty simple, really. I made a terrible mistake, people suffered as a result, and I had to pay the price. I wasn't sent to hell. I could well have ended up there, so I suppose I should count myself lucky. My temporary home was a crumbling and decrepit apartment building inhabited by a motley crew of bizarre individuals. This wasn't hell, but I guess it was some kind of purgatory. Every one of my neighbors was dead, and we all had our stories to tell. The complex we were trapped inside was anything but pleasant. Still, compared to what sat beyond our walls, the building was a sanctuary. Nobody ever stepped outside of our building. Some had tried in the past, from what I'm told, but it never ended well. The outside was eternal night, nothing except darkness under a ghostly pale orb. Our building was surrounded by a shadowland inhabited by unspeakable monsters and sadistic demons. As bad as it was in there, the outside was far worse. And I should know, because I had already seen these vile creatures in action. But to be honest, I thought little of the hellscape after we first arrived in this realm, because I wasn't alone in there. There were 3 of us living inside of this small and squalid apartment, 3 souls tied together in death, for better or for worse. Sally is my ex-girlfriend. More than that, actually. She's the mother of my child, but I didn't discover I was a father until it was nearly too late. My second roommate was Milo, the man who I'd killed in a drunk driving accident prior to my own death. I'd never faced justice for this crime on Earth, because Sally and I conspired to cover up Milo's death. It's pretty messed up, right? The 3 of us had been through a lot together, having literally fought through hell side by side. Still, the close confinement, boredom, and constant stress and anxiety gets to you in such a place. I don't know how long we'd been inside before the tension started to get to us. It was difficult to keep track of time in that realm. All I know is that the arguments became more frequent between the 3 of us, and we had few friends in this realm. 3 of us were newcomers in their home, and we weren't trusted. The block warden was a man called Marcus. He did his best to keep the peace, but it was a tough job, and I could see him fast approaching the breaking point. I watched this poor guy with his sullen eyes and pasty skin and wondered what hell he'd lived through to arrive in this place. But whatever his story was, Marcus wasn't for sharing. I vividly remember the night when the first incident occurred. There was something foul in the air that night, the stench even worse than the black mold which infested the building. I remember having this foreboding feeling as I lay on the hard mattress, staring up at the ceiling as I struggled to get some sleep. Sally lay beside me in the dark. She had nodded off about an hour before, although she remained restless, talking incoherently in her sleep as the nightmares invaded her subconscious. I didn't know what was going through her mind, but could hazard a guess. Our son was lost somewhere out there, on his own in an unknown level of the afterlife. Our boy had died alongside his mother in a freak car accident. I had never even met our son, but still, it pained me to think of him all alone. But I could only imagine what Sally was going through. For a mother to be separated from her infant child, I can't imagine a worse hell. I watched Sally suffer in her sleep for a while, covering her with a blanket and kissing her gently on the forehead. We weren't back together, and our relationship in there wasn't romantic. I felt no physical desire for her, and don't think it was possible to do so in that purgatory. But the love we'd once shared, those feelings hadn't gone away, even after death. I didn't think I could sleep that night, but finally I did drop off due to sheer exhaustion, but my slumber was anything but peaceful. Nightmarish visions invaded my dreams as suddenly I was back in the line, surrounded by snarling demons and trapped between heaven and hell. And then I was returned to the car, sealed in at the bottom of that damned lake as I smashed my fists against the windscreen in a futile attempt to break out. Once again, I was mesmerized by the dark water surrounding me, but terrified by the wide-eyed predators which swam in rings around my sunken vehicle. Nightmares such as these were all too common, unfortunately. But what followed next was a terrifying first. I shot up from the mattress, gasping in air as my whole body dripped with cold sweat. I'd awoken suddenly in a state of acute panic, but couldn't say why. Disturbances were more a frequent occurrence in this building, with bumps in the night happening around the clock, but this was something else. All my senses were heightened as I adjusted my eyes to the dark room, surveying my surroundings, but finding nothing out of place. I listened intently, but could hear nothing except for Sally's soft snores. All seemed in order, but still, I could tell something wasn't right. Call it a sixth sense, but I knew there was a threat I had to face. I looked to Sally and saw she was still asleep. I didn't want to wake her, so I got up carefully and quietly as I made my way to the bedroom door. Milo was sleeping on the hard couch in the living room, rolling over in discomfort as I passed him. I looked down upon Milo for a moment and felt a mixture of emotions. Life would be a lot easier if Milo wasn't here, but Sally and I owed him a massive debt. He said he'd forgiven us for taking his mortal life, but as time went on, I wondered. I saw the look he shot Sally and me and noted all the times he'd snapped at us. Frankly, who could blame Milo for holding a grudge? But there was more to it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I reckon Milo was hiding something from us. He rarely spoke about his mortal existence, other than the occasional references to his wife. Sometimes I wondered whether Milo really was just a random hit-and-run victim. But our roommate posed no threat on this night, as he remained fast asleep. I scanned the living room and saw nothing out of the ordinary. Perhaps I was just being paranoid. But no, I had to trust my instincts. Slowly but surely, I made my way across the living room floor and reached out for the ragged curtain covering the window. With considerable reluctance, I drew back the curtain, only to recoil in terror at what I saw. On the far side of the thin glass, staring in at me, was a huge eye. Its white sclera a good 3 foot in diameter, and the black pupil as large as a dinner plate. I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand to prevent myself from screaming. The horrifying giant eyeball took up most of the window, and I was unable to see the full form of the gigantic monster it belonged to. I don't know whether I was paralyzed in fear or trapped under the beast's wicked spell, but I couldn't move from the spot or avert my eyes from the demonic eye. It didn't blink or move, but I knew the beast was watching me. Surely a creature of this size could break through the window with ease, and yet it didn't. It just stared for I don't know how long. There's no telling how it would have ended, but suddenly I heard movement behind me, turning in time to see Milo rising from his slumber. I could only watch as my companion adjusted to his surroundings and saw the giant eye staring in at him.
"What the hell?"
He cried in disbelief. This prompted the beast to react as it let out a banshee-like wail so loud it drowned out all other sounds. I fell to my knees and covered my ears in a vain attempt to drown out the horrific din. There were footsteps behind me, and I saw Sally out of the corner of my eye, her face filled with pure terror. My attention remained on the window as the monster's foul wailing ended. I expected it to attack, but mercifully this didn't happen. Instead, the beast seemed to be spooked, since it retreated from the window and fled back into the Shadowlands. Against my better judgment, I darted forward in hope of getting a decent look at the peeping monster. In truth, I could make out little in the darkness, but the beast had the shape of a giant bird with a long and sharp beak and unnaturally large eyes. It retreated awkwardly across the dead ground upon long, stalk-like legs, which looked too thin and flimsy to carry its weight. Nevertheless, the beast moved quickly and soon disappeared into the darkness, leaving no trace of its unwelcome visit. I turned back towards Milo and Sally, all three of us in a state of shock and unable to utter a single word. I met with Marcus the next day. I suppose it would have been morning, except the sun never rose in this hellscape. The block warden was anxious. I could tell as much as soon as I saw him. We met under the dim strip lights in the staircase, whispering in the shadows so not to be overheard by the other residents. Marcus smoked like a chimney, looking over his shoulder nervously as he listened to my account. I noted the heavy bags under his eyes and reckoned the poor man must have slept for some time. Perhaps he wasn't permitted to ever rest in this hellish realm. I certainly didn't envy the job he had in there and reckoned it must have taken a toll on his sanity. Nevertheless, I told Marcus my story, describing the encounter with the saucer-eyed beast who'd stared into our apartment window. Marcus didn't comment as he listened intently whilst nodding his head solemnly. There was a lengthy pause after I finished giving my account, as it appeared Marcus was deep in thought. In the end, I had to prompt him. "Well, what do you think?" Marcus looked me in the eye, and I saw the pain and suffering he carried with him. He sighed deeply before eventually replying.
"This has always been a pretty weird place, Joshua. There's always an underlying danger and threat in the block, but there were also rules. I kept the peace as best as I could, and we survived, always waiting for the end of our respective sentences. Ours was a tough life, but it was just about survivable."
"So, what's your point?" I interjected impatiently. Marcus shot me a look, clearly angered by the interruption. I should have known better than to provoke a man on the edge.
"My point is, things are changing around here. The creatures who stalk the Shadowlands, they've always been out there, but they never came close to our building. That's all changed now, as you've witnessed."
Marcus lowered his head and broke off eye contact before continuing in a little more than a whisper.
"And there's been other incidents too. Shadowy figures walking the corridors, packs of harpies attacking the wire mesh, pale-skinned demons jumping over the rooftops. This isn't a safe place anymore, Joshua. I don't know how long I can keep it together."
I felt a cold chill run through me as the terrifying reality hit home. "I don't understand. What has changed? Why is this happening?" Marcus raised his head, his lips forming into a half grin as he answered.
"You did. You and your two friends arrived, and suddenly the whole place went to hell. If you'll excuse the pun."
I ignored Marcus's attempt at dark humor, feeling incredulous at his accusation. "You think we're responsible for all this?" I exclaimed defensively. Marcus shook his head.
"Not me, but the others are talking. They're scared and want somebody to blame. For what it's worth, I'm trying to talk them down."
He paused briefly, looking over his shoulder once again before he next spoke.
"I can hold them back for now, but if there's another incident, some of the residents are genuinely dangerous. Hastings, Dr. Marshall. Just watch your back, Joshua. That's all I'm saying."
My anger subsided somewhat when I realized Marcus was actually trying to help us. I was still scared, of course, but at least Marcus had given me the heads up. I held out my hand for the block warden to shake, a small act to show my appreciation. Marcus seemed shocked by the gesture, staring at my extended hand in puzzlement for a moment, but finally he shook, and I noted how his palm was ice cold. Marcus went to leave, but I still felt I owed him one. I placed a hand on his shoulder as he turned, watching him flinch at my touch. "Hey man, are you doing okay?" I asked sympathetically. Marcus didn't meet my eye, however, pulling away and continuing up the staircase.
"Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just having some trouble with my TV reception."
I didn't know what he meant, but Marcus wouldn't elaborate as he disappeared up the stairs and retreated into his apartment. As it happened, we didn't have to wait for long until the next incident inside the building. The crisis which brought it all tumbling down. The three of us were sitting down to have a meal at the small dining table in our living room. This was Sally's idea. It was a ritual more than anything else. We were dead, and so didn't need to eat. And the slop we had in front of us was from a can, and was far from appetizing. I played with the gruel on my spoon, not wanting to put it in my mouth, but then I glanced across the table and saw disapproval in Sally's eyes. I'd seen that look before. This was important to her, and so I needed to play along. So I lifted my spoon up to my lips, placing the food inside my mouth before I started to chew. Sally smiled with satisfaction as she took a spoonful from her own bowl.
"This is nice,"
she said, rather unconvincingly.
"It's good to get back to some normality."
I smiled and nodded, not wanting to break the illusion. But Milo wasn't playing ball. He scoffed in contempt, spitting out his food and dropping the spoon down on the table with a heavy thud.
"Remember your table manners."
Are you kidding me, lady? You really think we could play happy families in here after everything that's happened? Are you crazy?
Milo shot back angrily. I opened my mouth to respond, but Sally beat me to it.
"I know it's rough in here. We're all hurting, but we've got to make the best of it."
Milo shook his head in disgust, and I could tell he wouldn't back down. He glared at Sally, then at me, holding my gaze with hatred in his eyes as he snarled through clenched teeth.
You know, I thought I could forgive and forget what you both did to me. But I didn't think those sick bastards would stick me in here for the rest of eternity, trapped with the same assholes who killed me. Call me old-fashioned, but I don't want to break bread with my murderers!
I lost my head at this point, shouting as I stood up from my chair. Damn it, Milo! How many times? It was an accident! Milo stood up then, and so did Sally. We were all screaming at each other in a blazing row. I reckon it might have come to blows, but we had far more to worry about than domestic squabbles. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically, going from stifling heat to ice cold in mere seconds. I saw the instant change in Sally and Milo, their eyes widening in all too familiar terror as both looked over their shoulder. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as I slowly turned my head, only to come face to face with a monster sitting upon our worn-out couch. My eyes bulged and jaw dropped. I surveyed the beast who inexplicably invaded our sanctuary. The demon was the size and shape of a fully grown man, but it certainly wasn't human. The genderless creature was perhaps 6 feet tall in height, its skin a deadly shade of pale white. Its fingers were unnaturally long, and its nails were formed into razor-sharp talons. The demon's eyes were jet black and soulless, but the smile on its crusty lips was anything but friendly. It shot us a sadistic grin which showed off its rotten, yellowed teeth, but its stare was truly terrifying. A killer's gaze through dark and shark-like eyes. I was frozen in terror for a long moment, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but no, this couldn't be, because Sally and Milo could see it too. I didn't know what to do, but suddenly I felt a firm hand on my shoulder as Milo whispered in my ear.
Don't look at it. Don't react to its presence. It feeds off our fear. Ignore the bastard and it'll leave.
Milo's instructions sounded crazy to me, but he had more experience with these demons than I did, so I decided to trust him. Against all my instincts, I turned my back on the monster, once again facing the table and my now terrified companions. I could hardly breathe as I felt the beast's hard gaze on the back of my head.
Just pretend like everything's normal.
I looked at our companion in astonishment, but he met me with a stern look.
Everything is normal,
he repeated. Next, I glanced across at Sally and was alarmed to see her shaking almost uncontrollably. Her skin turned as pale as milk. I didn't know how we'd get through this, but Milo was taking charge.
You know, I was wrong, Sally. This is a good idea. Nothing quite beats a sit-down family dinner.
With that said, Milo took a spoonful of gruel and put it into his mouth. This actually brought a smile to Sally's lips, even though her eyes were still filled with terror. I wondered whether Milo's insane plan might actually work, but then I heard the low guttural growl from behind me, closely followed by the sound of claw-like talons clicking on the hard wooden floor. The sweat poured down from my brow as I listened to the demon walking across our apartment floor. I couldn't see the beast, but knew it was slowly marching towards our table.
Don't turn around,
Milo whispered whilst retaining a fake smile on his trembling lips.
Don't look at it, and don't react, no matter what happens.
The demon was right behind me now. I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck, and the foul stench it emitted filled my nostrils. It took everything I had in me, but I managed to keep my head down and avoid the monster's eyes as it circled the table. But Sally wasn't so lucky. She raised her head for just a moment, meeting the demon's hideous gaze for mere seconds. And that was all it took for the monster to latch onto her. I watched on in terror as the demon stood over her, extending its elongated fingers as it reached out to touch her cheek with its hideous talons. Sally was frozen in terror, her body trembling as tears rolled down her cheeks. This was more than I could stand as my protective instincts took over. I shot up from my seat. "Don't you dare touch her!" In an instant, the demon left Sally and it turned its attention to me, the sadistic grin widening as its dark eyes focused. The attack was so fast I couldn't react. It's all something of a blur in my memory, but I know the monster grabbed hold of me, its claws digging into my chest and making me scream in agony. The monster enjoyed my suffering as it snarled aggressively. It was so strong I couldn't resist. Before I knew it, my body was lifted off the ground and I was flung across the room like a rag doll, collapsing to the wood floor as the force of impact knocked the wind out of me. Sally screamed and Milo jumped up from his chair, but there was nothing they could do for me as the demon approached, its maw open and talons outstretched as it pressed the attack. I thought I was a goner, but just then I heard a crashing sound coming from the hallway as our front door was kicked in. Heavy boots followed, and a moment later, 2 armed men piled into the room, weapons at the ready. I looked up and recognized my neighbors coming to the rescue. Marcus was armed with a double-barrel shotgun, while Hastings carried his trusty crossbow. Both men had a fiery determination in their eyes, only hesitating for a moment as the beast snarled aggressively in their direction. Hastings fired first, shooting a bolt into the demon's shoulder. It howled in pain but didn't go down, prompting Marcus to empty both barrels into the beast's torso. The din of gunfire was near deafening and the gun smoke filled the room. The beast was flung backwards, its hide pierced by buckshot. It fell against the wall, and for a moment I hoped it was dead, but no such luck. Our enemy was hurt but still moving. Cornered and scared, it dashed forward towards the door. Marcus and Hastings just managed to jump out of the way as the monster tore past them, fleeing into the corridor and out the front door. Marcus and Hastings promptly reloaded before chasing after the beast. Meanwhile, Milo and Sally ran to my side and helped me to my feet, and the 3 of us followed our armed neighbors out onto the balcony. We ran out just in time to see the demon leap upwards with tremendous speed and power. Looking up, I saw our attacker smashing through the thin wire mesh which separated our inner courtyard from the dark skies above, making a heavy footfall as it tore across the tiles. Our neighbors opened fire, but the demon was too fast, and soon it leapt off the building and disappeared into the dark abyss of the Shadowlands, making good its escape. We survived the demon's assault, but only by the skin of our teeth. The ruckus and gunfire had alerted our other neighbors, as one by one the apartment doors shot open and a motley assortment of frightened and angry souls stepped out onto the balconies and courtyard below. Most of our neighbors were present. Widow Jackson sheepishly poked her nose out of her door, forever nervous and on edge as her eyes scanned the balcony, and Mr. Jones was on the ground floor looking more curious than anything. But that damn dog was with him, fighting against the leash as it barked maniacally up at the dark sky above. Cerberus was the mutt's name, and his owner called him a pet, but Jones's animal was the size of a large wolf and definitely not domesticated. And there was Dr. Marshall, who sauntered out of his front door and onto the balcony across from us, blood on his shirt as his dark eyes surveyed the scene with a predatory zeal. It chilled me to look upon the so-called doctor. I didn't know exactly what he did inside of his apartment with those special deliveries from management, but the foul smell of his apartment and the blood that seeped through the ceiling told a story. There were others too, neighbors who kept to themselves in this hellhole, just more lost souls serving their sentences for undisclosed sins. I scanned their faces and saw nothing but stress and fear. It seemed the entire community was on edge and one incident away from the breaking point. It was Hastings who spoke first, turning towards the 3 of us with anger evident in his cold eyes.
You damn people! You brought the trouble with you!
What the hell are you on about?
Sally shot back in confusion.
I'm afraid he's right, dear,
said Marshall.
These disturbances have only increased in frequency and severity since the arrival of your group.
There were murmurs of agreement from the other residents, as I could tell the crowd was turning against us. Marcus tried to argue in our defense, setting his shotgun down against the railings as he raised his hands defensively.
Come on, guys.
He said in a less than convincing manner.
This isn't the way we do things in here.
Things have changed.
Hastings said firmly, his hands still firmly clutching hold of his crossbow.
What do you suggest we do?
Marcus asked nervously.
Cast them out.
Came the cry from Marshall.
Let them take their chances in the Shadowlands.
You can't be serious!
Milo shouted back, but the mob was rapidly turning against us. I looked to my companions and saw the shock and terror in their eyes. Marcus went for his gun, but Hastings pulled the crossbow on him.
Don't do it, old friend. You need to let this happen.
The crowd started to move menacingly along the balconies towards us. The three of us backed off fearfully. I thought we could seal ourselves inside the apartment, but didn't think we'd last for long. Marcus continued to try and talk the mob down, but a moment later, his eyes were drawn upward. I saw the warden's face turn even paler and wondered what had spooked him.
Dear God,
he said whilst pointing upwards.
look.
Hastings grinned insanely as he continued to aim his crossbow directly at the warden's chest.
Come on, man. Do you really expect me to fall for that?
But Hastings should have listened. I heard the sound of scratching and tearing followed by a high-pitched shriek of something terrifying. Glancing up, I saw a red-scaled and winged monster crawling along the wire mesh and heading straight to the newly created hole in our thin protection. Its dark eyes lit up and its maw opened to reveal the sharp teeth within. Hastings heard the shriek and reacted quickly, but it was already too late. He managed to fire a single bolt high and wide before the bloodthirsty harpy dived on top of him, burying its claws and teeth into his body. The man screamed and struggled, but the winged demon used its immense strength to lift him off the balcony, still gripping a tight hold of its victim as it ascended with wings outstretched. Soon exiting through the same gap it had entered and soaring into the starless sky, taking the still screaming Hastings with it. We were all frozen for a moment, in shock. Our previous disputes forgotten as we faced this new and deadly threat, and the attack was just beginning. Harpies always hunted in packs, and many more followed the initial incursion, using the gaping hole in the wire to gain access. The apartment complex was no longer safe, and all hell was about to break loose. Terrified residents attempted to flee back into their apartments, but few made it that far, as the winged demons descended upon them, literally tearing their victims to shreds in a bloody slaughter. Chaos ensued as several things happened at once. There was a series of loud bangs from inside Widow Jackson's apartment. The woman screamed as she ran back into her apartment. At the same time, a trio of harpies launched a brutal attack upon Mr. Jones, but Cerberus was there to protect his master. The wolf leapt into the path of the first demon, biting deep into its throat with all the fury of hell. The harpy shrieked in agony as the two beasts struggled on the ground, but the demon bled out within seconds. Meanwhile, the other two harpies attacked Mr. Jones, grabbing him by the arms as he screamed and struggled. Cerberus wasn't done fighting for his master, though, as he leapt upon the second demon and tore at its wings. But it was too late for Jones, as the final harpy took hold of him, digging its claws deep before ascending. Cerberus barked desperately as he watched his master being taken, but the slaughter continued unabated. My attention was drawn back to Widow Jackson's apartment as a huge man charged out onto the balcony, screaming maniacally as his wild eyes scanned the courtyard below. He must have been 6 foot 6 inches tall and heavily built too. I noted how he wore childlike pajamas, which were several sizes too small for him, giving the man an almost comical appearance. I assumed this was Widow Jackson's errant son, Johnny, who had been confined to his bedroom until now. The man-child saw the demons feasting upon the neighbors and panicked, sprinting heavily along the balcony and heading for the staircase. Miss Jackson chased after her son, shouting his name frantically as she went, but sadly, the long-suffering woman didn't make it far as a harpy descended upon her from above and pulled the shrieking lady upward into a rapid and merciless attack. Events continued to move quickly as a pair of bloodthirsty harpies flew towards us, their vast wings flapping whilst their dark eyes focused upon us. Their intended prey, luckily, Marcus, was alert to the danger, aiming a shotgun and firing twice. The buckshot tore through the winged demons, shooting them out of the sky. I watched with relief as the monsters fell down to the courtyard and reeled in agony on the cold ground below us. The imminent threat was neutralized, but we were far from safe, as the monsters picked off our neighbors one by one.
We need to get back inside.
Sally said.
No.
Marcus replied firmly.
We must get to the lobby. It's our only chance.
We followed the warden's lead, running for the staircase as Marcus reloaded his weapon. I tried my best to drown out the awful din of the victim's screams and demons biting into flesh, instead looking to Sally and taking her hand as we descended. We soon reached the dimly lit lobby with its cracked tiles and moldy walls. I don't know what Marcus had planned next, but the situation was still developing. Johnny was using all of his considerable might to beat against the inner door, eventually smashing through. He then proceeded to pound on the second reinforced door, which was all that now stood between us and the Shadowlands beyond. We watched as the strong man attempted to break out, but the door was too strong for him alone. Suddenly, we heard a growl and the ominous sound of something big tearing down the stairs behind us. We darted out of the way as Marcus raised his gun in anticipation of another attack, but it wasn't a heartbeat coming down the staircase. It was Cerberus. The huge dog ignored our party as it charged through the lobby and headed straight for the door. Cerberus struck the door with all his considerable weight, and the combined strength of the dog and Johnny forced it open. We were suddenly hit by a cold wind as our final defense from the Shadowlands was breached, and before we could do anything, both Johnny and Cerberus fled out into the darkness, heading in opposite directions. Marcus laid down his shotgun as he rushed forward, shouting something about barricading the entrance, but he stopped dead in his tracks when a figure emerged in the doorway. Stepping out of the shadows so we could see his face under the flickering strip lights, I froze when I saw and recognized the entity who had shaped my journey through the afterlife. He might have been a ghoul, demon, or perhaps even an angel, with swirling vortexes in place of eyes, smiling menacingly as he stood in the doorway whilst wearing a full tuxedo and bow tie, thus appearing entirely out of place in this grim hellscape. I think all my companions knew who he was, Marcus included. I had never learnt the entity's true name and had simply christened him as the Dark Man. All I knew was that he held immense but not total power, but perhaps he could decide our ultimate fate. All four of us stood frozen to the spot as the Dark Man entered the lobby, the soles of his shoes clinking against the tiles as he came. At least I assumed there were only four of us, but I jumped in surprise upon hearing a familiar voice from behind us.
Ah, our patron. Such a pleasure to receive a visit from management.
I turned around and came face to face with Dr. Marshall. A thin and unnerving smile etched across his pasty cheeks. The doctor had somehow survived the massacre on the balconies, but my attention was drawn back to the Dark Man as he spoke out in a booming voice.
Gentlemen and lady, I'm glad to see you all made it through our latest test. Time is of the essence, so let me cut to the chase. This complex is no longer viable. You cannot stay here and must move on.
Move on.
You will leave through this very door and walk the Shadowlands.
Are you crazy? Those monsters out there, they'll kill us.
The Dark Man's grin widened, and he made a point of standing aside and pointing out into the darkness. And in front of our very eyes, two lines of white light lit up, a pathway leading through the Shadowlands and out towards the distant horizon. I felt a cold chill of déjà vu as my mind was thrust back to the terror I'd experienced after death.
Some of you have faced this test before. The others will learn soon enough. It's simple, really. All you need to do is stay inside the white lines and walk. Nothing can hurt you as long as you stay within the lines. Keep on walking until the end of the line, and then you'll all face your final fate. There's nothing more to it.
Why should we? We've all suffered enough already. I don't want to play your games anymore.
The Dark Man didn't miss a beat as he calmly responded to Sally's outburst.
I'm afraid you don't have the choice, madam. This structure will cease to exist in the very near future. You must walk the line or face the Shadowlands without my protection. Believe it or not, I'm trying to help you.
Sally didn't have an answer to this. I heard her making that nervous clicking sound with her tongue, and this reminded me of our past life together. No one spoke in the tense moment which followed, and I believe we all made a collective decision. The Dark Man turned to leave, offering us a final piece of advice before he disappeared into the dark abyss.
Stay focused on your objective, stay in the lines, and work together. These are the rules that will see you through.
And with that, he stepped into the shadows and vanished without a trace. We all stood in the lobby for a long moment, speechless and unsure of ourselves. We knew what had to be done, but I think the four of us were reluctant to take the first step. But Dr. Marshall held no such inhibitions as he stepped forward with a spring in his step and spoke jovially.
Come on, folks. You heard the man. There's no time like the present.
To my astonishment, the twisted physician marched out into the dark wasteland without a hint of fear, acting like he was simply going for a stroll in the park. I shook my head, thinking that Marshall must be completely insane. Nevertheless, he had taken the lead, and we all had to follow. And so the four of us reluctantly stepped across the tiled floor and toward the doorway. I hesitated, as every instinct in my body told me not to step outside. In the end, it was Sally who persuaded me, taking my hand and shooting me a sweet smile that reminded me of better times. However, there was a steady determination in her eyes as she spoke.
We need to do this, Josh. It's our only chance of getting back to Kevin.
I thought of the son I'd never met, and the fact he was all alone out there, and this gave me strength. Sally stepped out first, and I followed. Milo was next out the door, and Marcus was the last to leave. We walked single file within the lines, trudging through mud as a cold crosswind hit us. We could see little beyond the light emitted by the lines, but still I glanced nervously into the dark abyss and feared what monstrosities might be lurking in the shadows. I guess we'd only walked a couple of 100 yards before the ground started to shake. Turning around in a panic, we saw the artificial lights in the ugly apartment block extinguishing all at once. A moment later, the building itself began to sink into the mud, collapsing under the ground as a massive sinkhole swallowed it up. Before long, there was nothing left, as the hole sealed itself and no trace remained of our former home. I can't say I was sorry to see the prison go, but I noticed how Marcus stood for a long moment, sighing deeply before he finally turned away and left the past behind him. Our walk was a long one, the tension and fear only increasing the farther we progressed. We could see virtually nothing in the darkness, as even the pale orb in the night sky was eclipsed. But we could hear them, the invisible monsters who ruled the Shadowlands. They knew we were intruding on their turf and would surely like nothing more than to rip our bodies to shreds and feed upon our entrails. The low growls and predatory roars came from all around us, but the hidden demons and unidentified entities couldn't get to us, as the line offered protection. Still, the creatures were surely following our progress. We could make out their dark shadows and hear their heavy hooves trudging through the mud. Like all predators, they were searching for weaknesses, for one of us to step out of line where we'd be exposed and vulnerable. But we kept our cool and obeyed the golden rule: stay inside the lines and keep walking. Our next test was more of a challenge, however. About halfway along the line, we heard a most unexpected and unnerving sound come from the shadows, one which brought a cold chill down my spine, but almost broke Sally. It was the noise of a baby crying somewhere off in the distance, faint at first, but growing even louder. Sally stopped dead in her tracks as her eyes widened and she listened intently.
Kevin,
She said, whispering at first, but raising her volume to a frantic cry.
Kevin, it's Mommy. I'm coming for you, baby.
I had to act quickly, reaching out and grabbing her just before she stepped over the line. She fought fiercely, but I retained my tight grip.
Let me go, Josh. That's our son in there.
No, it isn't. It's a trick, Sally. They're trying to draw us out. I guess she had to fight all her maternal instincts, but Sally finally listened to reason and stopped struggling. She continued to walk the line with the rest of us, quietly sobbing as Kevin's cries faded away. This was only the start of it, however, as our ears were assaulted by cries and pleas for help from the darkness. It seemed that whatever demonic entity was hunting us could mimic the voices and tones of our relatives and loved ones, attempting every trick in its repertoire to try and lure us out. We heeded the dark man's advice and ignored the ghoulish calls, but they took a heavy toll upon our collective sanity. 4 of us were evidently very distressed, but not Dr. Marshall. He seemed fascinated by the terrifying situation, looking out into the shadows with an almost childlike excitement, which I found very disturbing. The depression hit soon after. I felt the darkness creeping inside of me. A deep despair and guilt as every bad memory and negative emotion came flooding to the surface. I believe the others were affected in the same manner, and then the confessions began. The crime committed by Sally and I was already common knowledge, but Marcus let it all slip out as he tearfully recalled the accident which had resulted in the deaths of his wife and 2 daughters. They died in a house fire caused by a cigarette butt he'd carelessly dropped. The warden's story was tragic for sure, but I was more interested in Milo's confession as our companion finally opened up to us.
You never asked why I was walking on the roadside after dark. You know, the night you guys hit me.
He began solemnly. Sally and I both glanced back, although Milo would not meet our gaze.
I had a big fight with my wife and stormed out. Truth is, I treated her badly. I let her down.
I stopped walking and turned around to face my companion, feeling a renewed sympathy for the man we'd wronged. You made mistakes, Milo. It doesn't mean you deserve all this. A long pause followed before he next spoke.
There was more. I did some really bad things.
I was hooked by this point, temporarily ignoring the terror all around us as I waited for Milo to elaborate. But his confession was interrupted by Dr. Marshall, who called back along the line with his own unwanted story.
You know, folks, I never actually killed anyone during my mortal existence. All my experiments were conducted on the recently deceased. I was caught in the act, and that was the end of my medical training. Things spiraled out of control, and sadly an opioid addiction ended my life. I always believed I was on the cusp of greatness. That's what was robbed from me.
Nobody had any response to the doctor's disturbing admission, and I was annoyed by the interruption, because Milo had lost his nerve and he wouldn't reveal the full context of his sins. I don't know how long we'd been walking for, but it seemed like miles trekked along the seemingly endless line. The voices stopped, and even the depression lifted. We were all physically and mentally exhausted, but I dared to hope the worst was behind us. Unfortunately, the next threat was not one I'd anticipated. Dr. Marshall was still leading the march at the front of the line until suddenly he stopped dead in his tracks, turning slowly to confront us. I saw his face illuminated by the white lines and was chilled by the sadistic grin on his lips and the dark intensity in his wide eyes. Sally stood between Marshall and me, but I instinctively pushed past her and put myself between her and the doctor. "What are you doing, Marshall?" I asked nervously. He chuckled dryly before offering a cryptic answer, and the look on his face was one of pure madness.
I hear them speaking to me, calling out from the shadows. They say I can be with them, that they'll show me wonders beyond human imagination and allow me to reach my full potential. They'll give me everything I've always wanted, and all they need in return is a sacrifice.
I tensed up as I realized that danger was imminent, but Marshall moved much faster than I could have imagined. He struck me with a hard punch, and I went down, my nose bleeding as a sharp pain shot through my skull. I landed in the mud as Marshall leapt over me and grabbed hold of Sally, using his arm to place her in a tight headlock. Next, Milo shot forward and attempted to save her, but Marshall lashed out and pushed him away. I fought through the pain and pulled myself up, but Marshall had already stepped out into the darkness. I went to chase after him, but Sally called out to stop me.
You have to go, Josh! Go to Kevin! He needs you!
I stood frozen in shock as the woman I'd once loved was dragged into the darkness, and both soon disappeared into the great unknown.
Get up. It's coming for you.
Came the sudden cry. That was Marcus, but his warning wasn't directed towards me. I looked over to Milo, who lay in the mud where he'd fallen, only to realize he was outside of the lines. Milo tried to crawl back, but it was already too late. Suddenly, a huge tentacle-like appendage shot out from the darkness and grabbed Milo by his leg, squeezing tightly before beginning to pull. Milo screamed and fought, but it was over very quickly, as the unseen monster dragged him into the abyss. My body trembled and tears rolled down my cheeks as I searched in vain for my companions, oddly believing what had just occurred. But then there was a firm hand on my shoulder and a sympathetic word in my ear.
I'm sorry about your friends, but we need to keep moving.
I nodded my head in painful agreement as the two of us slowly continued our march to an uncertain fate. The remainder of our walk was unnerving as the ravenous beast closely followed us. But we weren't going to slip up again. Both Marcus and I knew what was at stake now, and we wouldn't fall for their tricks and traps. We trudged along for some time before finally reaching the end of the line, only to see nothing but a dead end, as the white lights abruptly stopped, and there was nothing in front of us except for a dark and empty wasteland. I fell to my knees and felt like crying out in blind fury, but then there was a powerful burst of light before us. I was temporarily blinded by the intense illumination until eventually my eyes adjusted and I observed an extraordinary sight. The darkness of the Shadowlands was now replaced by two portals which sat at the end of the line. On the left was an inviting white light, and to the right stood a swirling vortex of blood red. My jaw dropped, but I was understandably cautious because I had played this game before.
Two portals,
Stated Marcus as he walked up beside me.
I guess it's an easy choice for us.
Don't believe it, I replied knowingly. This is a trick,
Not this time.
came the call from the darkness. I recognized the dark man's voice straight away, but I couldn't see him in the shadows. It hardly mattered, however, as the supernatural entity was merely present to deliver his final instructions.
No more tricks, gentlemen. This is the end of the line. Literally, in this case. The portals are exactly what they appear to be. The light leads to a better place, and the vortex to somewhere less pleasant. I'm sorry, gentlemen. You've come so far, and I'd hoped to free you both, but sadly, it's out of my hands. Only one of you can pass into the light. The second must enter the vortex and go to that other place, for a time at least. I can't make this decision for you, gentlemen. You'll need to resolve this yourselves.
And that was it, the dark man's final test. I felt sick to my stomach, hardly believing the situation they'd put us in. I was so sure it would come down to a fight between Marcus and me, a final desperate struggle fought in the mud and darkness. I turned to face the warden whilst expecting the worst, but I was surprised to see a sad resignation on his face, as Marcus smiled faintly whilst placing a firm hand on my shoulder.
You know, Joshua, I've spoken to my wife since I got here. Don't ask me how, but I managed it. I've begged her for forgiveness, but she isn't ready to give it.
He sighed deeply before continuing.
I don't blame her. I guess I still have penance to make. I miss my girls so much, but they've got their mother to look after them, wherever they are. But you have a son, Joshua, and he's all alone. It should be you who walks into the light. I'll find my own way when the time is right.
I was overwhelmed with emotion upon hearing those words and awestruck by Marcus's selfless sacrifice. I don't know what to say,
You don't have to say anything.
was the warden's firm reply.
We'll go together. On three.
Marcus and I stood side by side, him facing the vortex and me the light. He counted down and we ran forward in unison. The bright light consumed me, pulling me out of the darkness and dropping me somewhere new. As I record my final account, I am sitting on green grass with the sun shining down upon me. I'm surrounded by beauty and life in a pristine and colorful garden. But what brings me the most joy is my son. I watch as Kevin crawls along the soft grass before me, laughing joyfully as he experiences this paradise through the eyes of a child. Kevin is loved and safe, but it pains me that his mother isn't here with us. Perhaps one day, Sally will make her way back to us. But sadly, this is beyond my control. As for me, I don't know whether this is justice or whether I truly deserve this second chance. But I can't dwell on the mistakes of the past, as I spend eternity trying to make amends. Hello everybody. So yeah, that was the final part of the Line series I've been working on, and I'm going to be compiling all these into the full story like I normally do with the series. And the story is by Mark Lynch. He's a regular on the channel, you may recognize some of his work. But yeah, I really liked this one. I thought it was an interesting combination of rules-based stories, but also with afterlife stories. And I found the concept of the line and the portals, and the trade-off where if the person in front of you line goes into one portal, then you have to go in the opposite one, and the person behind you goes into the other one. And yeah, I've been wanting to wrap up some of the stories that I had started a while ago, but may not have finished the last few parts of. So you may see a few more of those coming for some older videos that just kind of bring everything together so I can finish the story. But if the stories are too old, I'm going to be redoing them, kind of like what I did with Portal in the Forest, because I originally did the first 2 parts, or maybe 3 parts of Portal in the Forest like 7 years ago. So when I completed the series, I just went back and redid those first few parts. And I have one other story that is coming along soon that a lot of you have been waiting for. It's had a lot of hiccups, but I think everything is finally sorted out, so yeah, I'm really excited for that for you all. But other than that, I've also been thinking about starting a more consistent streaming schedule, perhaps where I make music or read stories that are for the channel or just hang out, but maybe at least doing that twice a week. Maybe once during the weekday and then once on the weekend. I'm not really sure yet, but let me know if you all enjoy the live streams. I know currently I just kind of do them whenever I feel like it, so they're very random, and I don't really announce them beforehand. But if you'd like me to schedule some so you can always know when they're going to be and you want to come around, just let me know. Also, again, a reminder that the narrations on the podcast for the Dark Somnium, just on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff, it's almost fully caught up with the channel, and once that is fully caught up, I'll be releasing them on Spotify and iTunes the same day, pretty much the same moment that they go up on YouTube. So that'll just be another way for you all to watch the stories when they're fresh. But yeah, I'm excited to see what you all thought of this story. When I do the compilation, I'll probably go a little bit more in depth on the overall story, including my music choices and sound design. But yeah, I'll be in the comments like I normally am. If you want to help out the channel, feel free to like and subscribe. But with that said, have a great weekend.